This is Jen Maher, your guide towards soulful prosperity. And as your guide, she is on a mission to help you unlock your highest potential. By implementing effective systems and processes, she helps entrepreneurs reclaim lost time and profits, which reflects as more freedom and joy in their hands. From battling addiction and homelessness to facing significant financial losses, Jen is no stranger to a challenging life herself. However, she has turned these hardships into lessons of resilience and growth, lessons which I'm eager to share with everybody listening. In this episode, we'll talk about how trauma can be the best catalysts for surpassing your greatest expectations. So get comfortable and listen as the Soul Prosperity Coach and I flip our lid and reach beyond our current space. Enjoy.
Welcome back, everybody, to Flipping the Lid. We just continue to get amazing guests who are willing to jump in and tell their stories and the real raw components that normalize conversations that I believe need to be had. We get deep, we get raw, we get real. And guess what? Our guest today is no different. She is somebody that really brings it, has real life experience in a variety of ways, is multifaceted in her studies, happens to actually be an ordained Buddhist minister on top of everything else that she does. But as a soulful prosperity coach, her whole goal is ultimately to help people actually overcome addiction, challenges, and be able to build their lives and their businesses in the way that they want. One of the things that I resonate deeply with this woman on is the fact that she also identifies first as a mother, as a grandmother, and in the way that she looks at her most intimate relationships and building her life. So I can't wait to jump into this conversation today. So Jen, I'm so happy you're here with us.
Thank you. That was a great introduction. I appreciate it. And you hit the most important points for sure.
Well, that's good. Every once in a while I get lucky. So I appreciate that. My friend, the only question I ask every guest on this show, and you've answered it before on one of our other shows, but it's, that's how I've described you in the little bit of time I know you and the elements that I do know about you. But who are you in your words?
Who am I in my words? Well, I am a soul on a journey, which is not something I always understood. And I have been through a lot of challenging circumstances in my life. And at the age of 51, I'm now 53, had yet one of these situations arise in my life, but I was in a different place for it. And all of a sudden I pivoted, but not only pivoted, I realized what my calling was. And my calling was potential, to help people understand their potential. I had no clue what I was capable of, or that I could be anything in the world. I didn't know. And so you don't have to be somebody who's hit rock bottom and has gone through all the things that I have done. Actually, those are a blessing, because I have almost never had a choice. Well, I guess you always have a choice, but I had to get through survival and then get past even survival mode to get where I am today. Many people live in mediocrity, which is a much more painful hell as far as I'm concerned, because you have all this potential. I mean, we all have equal potential. Any amazing thought that has ever occurred, or the person who you think of that you think is this great human being doing all kinds of things, whatever it is that you admire, you are capable of exactly the same thing, because you are made up of exactly the same things. And so I guess that's who I am in a word, somebody who is passionate about getting that message out and helping people to get unstuck and to tap into the highest version of themselves. I'm becoming the woman of my dreams, and I would love to help as many people do the same.
I appreciate where you took that answer as well. And I would tell you that my biggest pet peeve in life is unlived potential. And, I would tell you that that's also an area that we spend a significant amount of time, is to be able to get people to be able to stand in their power and their potential. Now, you said something that I think there's a small nuance to, and I want to go a little deeper and ask a question on it, because, I look at the fact that we all have access to the same opportunity. We all have access to the same abundant energy that's available outside of some of the man-made constructs that are divisive and oppressive in our society. In general, if we look at human beings and we take out all of the structure of control and hierarchy in our world, right, we technically all have access to the same things. Now, you said, right, that we can do anything and that we can actually tap into the same potential that some of the highest level and operating people in this world have in many, many cases. I don't disagree with that, but what I do find is that everybody's potential isn't necessarily equal, even though we all have equal opportunity. And what I mean by that is I believe that there are certain people who have different gifts, different intuitions, different levels of capacity, different levels of access to different parts within their self that allow them to have unique abilities in this world that might outpace someone else, right? Like, I can't be LeBron James. Right. He has a physical gift that leads who he is. And I could sit here and practice and believe that I'm going to be the greatest basketball player of all time. But will I ever be Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, or LeBron James? No, I won't. But could I be the highest performing player within a certain realm as possible? And so how do you describe and help people navigate that it's not about a comparison? Because that's the thing I want to escape here. It's not about comparing me to say I'm never going to be as good as LeBron James. It's about identifying what is my peak potential and how do I accomplish and live into it. So what's the nuance in how you describe that? And how do you help people actually understand and identify what their potential really is?
Well, just potential is personal.
I agree.
And so you shouldn't even be starting with, I want to be that. It's more about the values, the virtues that person embodies that you are attracted to. So once you know you're attracted, like, you think whatever, Oprah Winfrey, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. She's graceful. She's generous. She's all successful. Whatever those attributes are that you are attracted to, automatically tells you that that's because you have it within you. You're not going to be attracted to things that and the same thing is the things that turn you off is because you have them within you. So I had a huge journey with that and laziness that I'll save for another part of this.
Yeah.
If we go there. But so it's equal. So you're not looking to become Oprah Winfrey. You're looking to become the absolute best version of yourself. So, hold on. My granddaughter walked in the room, even though the door is locked.
It's okay. Family first always in my world.
You.
Yeah.
So,
and by the way, with your permission, I'm going to leave that in the recording because it's the real raw element of who we are, and it's family. So
with me right now. I'm not big on editing. So you want to start out, when we start out, I set that expectation that we are looking to become, and then the other thing, we're looking to become the highest, best version of ourselves.
Bingo.
And the other thing is then we say, these are our goals, right? Which is why I've switched so much over to vision casting, which is a whole nother way of doing goal setting. But so these are my goals. And I learned this because I had so much to make up for. I've told you a little bit about what I went through in my 20s, but I overcame serious addiction, living on the streets, and all the trauma and drama and craziness that goes along with that. And so I lost my train of thought for a second. So, what were we talking about? Bring me back.
Potential. Yep.
So tapping into your full potential is a total personal thing. And so you cannot begin it, just like I already said, with thinking you're going to become this person and that person. There's my thought. So you set goals. And because I discovered my why was really not to be the best version of myself or any of those things. My why was to not be that person. I do not want to be that person in my 20s. I'm like, if anybody finds out about that person, so I need to become superwoman and become amazing at everything and, exhausting, not sustainable, totally doable. I had very, high levels of success and from the outside looking in. So what I did is I had this 7-year plan that I put together 10 years ago or 11 years ago. And I hit almost everything on that 7-year plan, but I still had a void. I still had this emptiness. But the biggest thing that I discovered was because I was so rigid with it and literally I was sticking square pegs in round holes for some of them, but it worked and I could check it off, was that I know now that I missed out on the divine plan. what the universe had and still has in store for me, because I was so busy manipulating the energy and trying to, make it the way that I see it in my vision and my plan. So you have to be flexible also. And all you really are is trying to become the best version of you. And so, yeah, you do start with goals, but then they are going to morph and change, which is what I love about the 2 years that I've been, working for myself, doing my own coaching business. I'm literally like building the plane while I'm flying, but with the best engineers on board and with really good intuition. So it's like, okay, this is where that energy is, and this is where that energy is, and where I am right now today. I am so grateful. I feel free and like the sky's the limit. I feel supported, protected, and loved. And guess what? I'm not where I need to be financially or any of those things, but I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I can feel it in every pore.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate even what you just said around kind of the energy, and it comes down to this deep level of alignment, right? That I believe exists. And when we can kind of create some of that alignment, a lot of the resistance and interference starts to evaporate. I'm going to come full circle to a couple of different questions that are around alignment and some core values, but I would like to take you back, because you did just hint at it, obviously, in that answer around some of the hard times in your life, some of the toughest challenges, some of those places where you were not in alignment, and therefore there was lots of resistance, interference, and damage in and around your world. So give us a little bit of insight into the path in your life, or the patterns that kind of were created as you started down this path of addiction that led and ultimately landed you on the street. And at what point did you become awake to the fact that this was not who you were, or in alignment with the representation of who you were becoming?
Oh, it's been a really long journey, and it started, at a very young age. Just, I was a child of a single mom. I have a brother 2 years older than me. Parents were divorced when we were infants, and my mom really didn't have a mother and father that raised her. She was raised by alcoholic aunts and uncles and went from one house to another. So she did the best that she could. But I basically was raised in an environment where I had no supervision. I didn't have any role models. I didn't have any support, any guidance, and just left to my own devices and my brother's, whose devices were worse than mine at the time. And he didn't end up in the trouble like I did, but he was a troubled kid. We went through a lot of stuff, a lot of trauma in our childhood, and just we moved maybe 15 times in 21 years. And we lived in apartments, and I grew up in Staten Island and Brooklyn. So most of the time I lived in like a basement apartment of somebody who was very affluent and in, nice neighborhoods, and, spent my time around people that were very affluent. And so I kind of just had this whole disconnection. I didn't feel connected to anyone ever. And again, I just saw myself as less than everybody else, as trash, honestly. And I think it was a gift that took me down so low. It was actually a boyfriend that I was, always drank too much. I was the girl. I created this persona to cope with not being the beautiful, perfect girl with like all the clothes in the closet and, everything that everyone else around me had. And I was this party girl, this crazy girl who would try anything and do anything. And it put me in a lot of bad situations. And I was used a lot by men, and a lot of trauma around that, before 16. And then at 16, I met a boy, and we were together for maybe a year and a half. And he turned me on to a drug that he told me was cocaine, and it wasn't. It was heroin, and I was in love the minute I did it. Now, I never used a needle, but it still took me down the path. And Mark, may he rest in peace, he actually just died last year. He was found. He overdosed and was found on a train in Coney Island. So I have nothing against him, because if it wasn't him, it would have been somebody else. And it was I think at that point, I just always knew that I was meant for something more, but I didn't know how to get there. I didn't know how to see it. I didn't know how to tap into it. And so I think the journey to the bottom was my way of figuring it out. And even on the streets, I had so many amazing interactions, and I can see now like angels and the elements even supporting me to get me through. So I learned a ton, and then I wound up pregnant in under the worst circumstances you can imagine. I went pregnant with my eldest daughter, who now has my granddaughter, and that woke me up. But it didn't wake me up entirely. It woke me up to what I spoke about earlier. It gave me this drive to not be that person. Unfortunately, that drive did not include being a present, amazing mother. Now, I was a good mother, not a great mother, because I instilled love. I have two of the most amazing human beings that you'll ever know, really beautiful women inside. So there was some part of me that did something right. But as far as being present and helping create opportunities for them, I didn't break that cycle. I really just became driven by making everybody think I was amazing. And I was not this girl, this street girl. And that's what I did. So I just got my real estate license while I was pregnant, and, climbed to the top of the industry in my area, and then became an industry leader, and then got very involved with my community, became a community leader, and then got involved with the business community and became a business leader, all the while still using alcohol as a crutch, and probably men too, fill the void. The void was still there. And then I started, at some point in this journey, I ended up in the monastery and got, started meditating and got my ordainment in being a meditation teacher and a Buddhist priest. And I was practicing these things, but I hadn't found my seat of consciousness yet. I hadn't discovered who I am. I didn't know. And it's so funny because I still had this persona of the party girl. I was the businesswoman with the clout, with this and that. But you want to have fun? You're going out with Jen. Still had this persona. And guess what? Guess who I am now? I am like a total nerd who's studying as many things at one time as possible, who likes to be in bed by 8 p.m. I haven't touched alcohol in nearly 3 years without a desire. Just woke up and it just finally happened when I was able to answer this.
Yeah.
Who am I? And so, I don't know, that was probably a convoluted journey to your answer. And then that wasn't it. There was lots of trials and tribulations in those years. And then 2 years ago, when I had really come into myself, I still wasn't listening to my intuition. I was in a business partnership that I had outgrown, that he was having financial struggles, and I didn't listen to myself and my gut and my intuition. I wanted to break off. I wanted to get out of real estate after the 27 years, and I wanted to open my own coaching business. And I even went back and read my journals the other night for that period, and looking what I was writing and not listening. And I guess the universe decided, like, listen, lady, you haven't done it all. You haven't come full circle. And it blew up. So my life savings, my income, which was about $500,000 a year. I worked hard to get there. My life savings, my income, and my persona blew up.
Yep.
Boom. In like 10 minutes, I was on top of the world. But guess what? Because what I didn't mention is I got involved with a coach about 3 years prior to that. And that's where I had stopped the alcohol and had just like taken everything full circle, like this spiritual practice, this, business acumen, this, being a leader. I'm a natural leader. I don't, it's just a gift. I didn't ask for it. I didn't cultivate it. It just happened, brought it all together, and had put in place morning rituals, evening rituals, and all kinds of things to prop me up as a human being and help me get into that seat of consciousness. So I was there. So when this happened, I was like, oh, this is great. Immediately, I was like, okay. And I just, boom, went right into it. So no, I'm not where I was. But guess what? I'm going to the Dominican Republic to Saturday. I'm going for 3 weeks. That's 9 weeks in 9 months. Doing what I want to do still. And I'm 1,000% present from both my daughters and my granddaughter. And just, I've become the best version of myself that I'm capable of being in the moment, and always growing and perfecting that. But I am in integrity, and I am in alignment with all the areas of my life.
Yeah.
And that's the first time ever.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate, you said it was a convoluted answer, but it was really just a linear progression of your life and hitting on the high points in a really condensed way. I wouldn't say it was convoluted at all, because everything had purpose and meaning in the way that you articulated it. You said early in, you were disconnected from everybody, but what's true is you were really disconnected from yourself, which prevented your ability to connect with others. We teach this concept of the human experience, that we all seek and desire 4 things, and your early childhood makes it very obvious, right? That you didn't get all of these. We all want to feel safe. We all want to feel protected, and those are not the same thing. We all want to feel seen and understood, and we all want to feel connected, right? The second we don't feel safe and protected, or seen and understood and connected, what do? We protect ourselves, right? And all of what you just talked about was a combination of intellectual and emotional armor that showed up in actions to either numb yourself or try to appear a certain way, because like many other high performers, you learned to receive love, validation, and connection through performance, contingent upon what you did for yourself, for others in the world, right? That's what your value was tied to. And so to hear the progression of all of what you just discussed, it's truthful, it's honest, it's raw, right? But you also were not in a position where early in your life, you had the permission to actually stay connected to yourself because of all of the dynamics that you articulated with your family, right? And so this happens to so many of us, right? We wake up, we're the brightest, most authentic, burning light we'll ever be. And then parents, teachers, coaches, employers start telling us who we should be, who we should not be, what we should do, what we shouldn't do, and start funneling us down this path until we fit into a box based on who the world has told us who to be. But what you talk about, right, with like alcohol, right? Alcohol was one of those things. I literally called it liquid courage for myself. It was my armor. It was alcohol armor, because it would allow me to feel okay in environments when every part of my being was telling me that this isn't where I'm supposed to be. And what would I do? I'd just drown it in the moment and put on the lively party face and be able to go do what I needed to do in that moment, right? Again, for validation, love, connection. You talk about not being able to be present with your girls, particularly early on, right? What you did say, though, is I've always loved on them, and I've given them the ability to love on themselves. And right, they're really strong, capable human beings. I would suggest that there's many people who don't believe that you can do that if you lack presence. I believe that you can. You can infuse love. You can infuse life. You can do these things. But because presence can mean different things to different people, right? Help us understand, where is it that you lacked presence specifically with your girls, and how have you brought that full circle with your grandkids?
Okay, so I will say that my daughters are beautiful, capable, strong human beings, but they both struggle. And I can see exactly where they struggle today, how it's linked to where I wasn't present. And I get the opportunity to reparent not only with my granddaughter, but with them. And I guess the presence was, I didn't know how to put them first. I wasn't that mom. And I put the career and the, my, I guess, persona, for lack of a better way to describe it, as the priority, that somehow focusing on that would make them, that's what they needed. Really thought that, really believed that. And because I didn't have anybody even doing that. I had the one pair of jeans, and it was a struggle. So I thought materially giving them things that way. And then, that went up and down. Listen, I was in real estate, single mom, and then the market crashed. Okay. So the material things went away for a while, and I really struggled at that point, and then, built it back up. So being present is is not just being in the same house.
Yes.
And I like to think about this. It's really like you can be in the same house and you can be expanding together, or you can be contracting, right? Together. So you could all be in the same house, but one's over here on this phone, one's over there watching this TV, and the other one's over there, scrolling, right? And so we spent a lot of years of that, and then I would be using my crutch at the end of the night. I would be having a few cocktails, and just once I would have a drink, even if it was just one, you're shut off. You're like, just kind of done. When I think and I calculate all the hours I wasted with them and with, for myself, because now I average, this week I'm not going to average as many hours of sleep as normal. So I have weeks where I'm doing certain things where it's okay, but I am now averaging like 7 hours of sleep, plus getting in so much productivity because it feels good and because I want to. And so all the hours wasted. So being present is really, being in tune to their needs, their challenges, their fears. And while I was in tune to some of it, I did not know. I mean, I remember in the pandemic, my youngest, who was like the perfect child, right? She's just freaking drop dead gorgeous and so smart and so articulate and blah, blah, blah. And I never worried about her. And obviously I was always focused on Olivia because she was born addicted and I had so much guilt. Then all of a sudden through the pandemic, Julia was a mess. And that's when I realized, holy shit, like, oops, I hope you're allowed to say that.
Yeah. We have the explicit classification on our podcast because I use the F-bomb regularly. So yeah, we're good.
It's one of my favorites too. So I'm like, holy shit. Like I have not been paying attention to this child, just thinking she's on autopilot. So that was a huge, huge awakening. And unfortunately, it was a little too late for some suffering. But I'm also a true believer in, what you go through, you grow through, especially when you have, now I'm able to be there with her and help her through. But it's also not my job. My job is also to be here to pick up the pieces and support and all that, but not to control and manipulate her energy either and her outcomes or her desires. So it's a whole balancing act. And it's like, you can't be in guilt because that's not going to work. It's just, being in integrity, like, and it's knowing where you fell short and then being able to be there now. You can't absolutely make up for it. But you can be there now.
But it is pretty incredible how historical damage and energy can be neutralized and diffused with honesty and ownership in the current time.
Amen.
Right. And so to the point of what you're even communicating, right? Like, yeah, there were areas that you were unconscious in points as a parent that now you are conscious and not only communicating about it, but demonstrating action to establish trust beyond that, right? Because you can own it, communicate it, but if the same patterns continue, then you don't really ever escape it and they don't ever start to establish trust. Instead, what's happening is that you're recognizing gaps and areas that repair might be needed. And you're actually facilitating by just transparency and vulnerability that this was a role that you could have been better in, but you also didn't know what you know now. Right. And so to your point on not living in guilt, the second we fit into the shame and blame energy, we lower our frequency so much that we shut everything else off anyway. And so for you to instead just recognize, it's like, look, I made the best decisions I could given the information I had at the time. Look, I think that we're phenomenal parents, my wife and I, but I also had anger issues that I unpacked that no longer affect our family. We reverse generational patterns. I've been given a gift that my children don't consciously remember having an angry dad. However, right, are there still residual ripple effects from moments? I'm sure there will be. Are there things that we are doing very intentionally that we think are going to help in their development and who they are that likely will create damage or separation later in their life? I'm sure of it, right? And so that's one of the things we communicate often to our children is, look, like, we weren't given a manual. We don't know what we're doing. we're doing the best we possibly can. And we know that we're not going to do it perfectly. And so I would just want to honor you for where you're at in your level of transparency, honesty, and ownership, because that goes a long, long way in especially historical repair. Now, go ahead. You looked like you were about to say something.
Well, no, because I've also been looking a lot into this historical repair as far as ancestral healing.
Yep.
Like you can, because we come from, I don't know who my eldest daughter's father is. So, but my youngest daughter and obviously my eldest daughter's maternal side, like we come from crazy deep dysfunction.
Yep.
Like really.
By the way, like most fucking families.
Yes.
Let's just own it for what it is. Like,
yes. But
every family has shit.
Was so obvious that everybody knew it. Each generation wasn't hidden. It was boom. And so I know that. So congratulations to you, because you didn't just boom become angry. It was programmed in you from your ancestry and from whatever you witnessed in the womb, and from teachers and all that influence up to the moment where
that's exactly right. I mean, my wife and I, when we started doing the really deep work, we tracked our triggers and patterns back 3 generations.
Oh yeah.
And can see the sources, where it happened, how it showed up, all of the above. I mean, it's not the singular source. One of my sources of anger came from my father. My father was one of like 4 white families in a 10-mile radius of Black neighborhoods during the Martin Luther King era. Wow. And he had an alcoholic father who beat the shit out of him. And he was the oldest that protected his 4 brothers and his mother, right? Yeah. Like he never hit me one time, right? But did he have a short fuse and a trigger? And did he get angry? Yeah, of course. But this is one of the biggest things I see as important in our healing journeys. We call it the trash from people's past. It's what's connected to what we call our waste to wealth methodology. But the very first thing I say, what is the trash from our past? It's the emotional triggers, behavioral patterns, and environmental conditioning that have caused a set of beliefs that our lives have only further validated. They've proven that trauma gets passed down through DNA. Even if actions and behaviors don't affect it, there's a ripple effect through generations on a genetic level. And this is real, right? And we're starting to understand it at a different level. But the biggest thing about understanding the trash from our past is it is not your fault. It just becomes your responsibility once you become aware of it, or you start burying others in yours. And that's what you've realized and communicated. What I also heard, and though you didn't say these words, there was a subtle undertone of all of the control that you exhibited in your life to become someone that you felt like others would want to be around, see, right, admire. Right? Control is an attempt to create safety for ourselves in lots of ways. And yet I hear that you're in a completely different state today. So help me understand, when did you identify and start to transition from a control state to a surrender state?
2 years ago, when that happened with my business partner, because I realized that even the not listening to my intuition was because it was being blocked by the control. And so you can even get good results. You can get great results, but you won't get your results.
Bingo.
You won't get the results that you deserve. You won't get the full outcome that the universe has in store for you.
Yeah.
So the minute that you're controlling, I have a talk I do called Becoming Anti-Fragile. And there's a great book. I sometimes forget certain things, but the book is called Anti-Fragile. It'll come to me who wrote it. But my story about becoming anti-fragile, I was strong. I've never been fragile. And I thought being strong was amazing. And it was my calling card, and it was who I am. And I was tough. And then I realized, first of all, this being strong was literally like, wearing, the kick me sign you would put on as a joke. It was like wearing the kick me sign. And so then, becoming anti-fragile is where you can be soft again. It's about being flexible, and it's about, getting stronger through challenges. And one of my coaches, Brian Johnson, if you don't know him, look into his work. He's on a major mission. He's an amazing human being. He, I don't know if it's him or one of his coaches that says, you get to the point where you're eating stress like energy bars. Bring it on, right? That's a David Goggins type thing, just bring it on. We got this. Let's go. And that's the only mindset, but not in a, you know, got to be strong survival mode type of way, in full trust and having 100% responsibility for your emotions, 100% responsibility for your outcomes, and knowing that no matter what, move forward with hope and everything will be okay. Better than okay, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. You know, what's interesting, there's been this like shift for me, even in the word you just used, living and existing in hope. I find that when people exist in hope, many of them also feel helpless, right? And instead, I think, like, what's behind hope? It's really trust that everything is going to be okay, right? And how and establishing that it's like beyond just this idea and desire and hopefulness, but it's trusting that everything will be okay. Right? Trusting that the universe and God, Allah, however you want to call it, right, is got your interest and that everything has divine plan, although you also have personal influence, right?
Yes, but you have more. Like, you trust and faith comes from within.
Bingo.
It's not this blind, because I struggled with the word. You know, I had a mother who called herself a recovering Catholic and a father who's a Jehovah's Witness, and it was extreme. And the word faith. But then when I realized that faith and trust really comes from knowing that no matter what, I am capable. I'm going to show up. I'm in integrity, and I'm blah, 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 and I'm doing the action. There's that, I don't know if you ever heard that story or the parable about the guy who was in like a flood and he's praying for God, please God, send me some help, send me some help. And like a boat comes by, hey, you want to get, no, I know help is on the way. And then something else. And the guy's like, no, I know help is on the way. And then he's drowning and he goes to heaven. He drowns and goes to heaven. He said, God, you know, I thought you were going to help me. He's like, I did. I sent the boat and I sent the, you have to take the action and you have to, you know, get up and show up. And that doesn't mean you need to be perfect, but you do need to be impeccable. That's the difference.
Yeah. I appreciate even the way that you just answered that question. You know, one of the things that I find interesting, and this is the part of being a human, right? You're an ordained Buddhist priest, that a lot of the lessons that you realized only 2 years ago for yourself are deep in the teachings of Buddhism.
Yes.
Right. And I say that not to like highlight anything like bad on you, but this is to me the they call it the humorous part of religious faith, as I'm going to call it. Right. And just this like element of all of our religion in this world are ultimately a man-made construct written in the limited language that we have to interpret what I believe is often the same thing in multiple different places. Yet there's a lot of lack of congruence sometimes from people who preach, position, discuss, or talk about certain things. And yet what I love about this is that you're also sitting here saying like, no, like I learned, I got ordained, I'm doing all these pieces, I understand these concepts. But until you experienced it at an embodied cellular level, it didn't matter. Right.
Yeah.
And it's not that none of it had impact in your life and trajectory. It did. It got you back onto this path of healing, understanding, increasing capacity so that you were able to finally get there. But the beautiful part of what you just talked about is after years of practicing this, only 2 years ago, did you fully embody at a cellular level all of the components that you'd been convincing yourself were truth for the prior decades.
Absolutely. I learned a lot when I got very involved with the monastery up here. I was teaching and doing all these kinds, so I was spending time with some really, you know, studied, learned monks, you know, people that studied. My teacher studied right under Thich Nhat Hanh. And then we had Bhikkhu Bodhi, who's one of the most famous Buddhist monks, who's actually a Brooklyn Jew. So I love that. You know, but I love that works, too. Yeah, his works are, you know, renowned and really just, he's one of the highest level teaching monks or monastics that exist in Buddhism in this country. And I got to watch them in their chaos and in their moments where, you know, it was, and it helped me because I'm like, these people are meditating 5-6 hours a day and practicing mindfulness and blah, 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 you know, all these, embodying these teachings, but yet
they're still fucking human.
Yes.
Yes.
And it helped me. It helped me so much because it was powerful. It was a powerful lesson because I was, and that's where I learned too. Like someone said to me finally, like, stop trying to transform. And that's one thing when I lean on AI just a little bit, it always throws that word in there. And I just don't love that word because we already are.
Yeah.
We already are. So don't try to transform. Try to rise up the things that you want more of, and try to. One of my teachers taught like a dirty mirror, right? A mirror that you can't even see. It's just polishing and polishing and polishing. Yep. You're not transforming the mirror. The mirror already is.
Yep. Yeah, I draw this analogy that I think represents the same thing. It's just this image where I write the word you on a screen, and then I put a bunch of layers of arcs below it. And those layers of arcs are pain, right? Yeah. All the areas that we've experienced pain in our life. And then on the top side of you, it's another arc, and it's those layers of armor, right? And the reality of it is like to get back to our most authentic selves, it's a process of healing pain to shed the associated armor so that we can actually get closer and closer back to the core of who we are. Right now, what's interesting is that can feel like a transformation process. I mean, if you think about a caterpillar going into a cocoon that then becomes a butterfly, they're shedding the layers to ultimately come out a different version, right? Right. But I understand and appreciate the nuance of also what you just said. And I agree with you. Yeah. I actually believe that we already are our most authentic selves. We already have all that we need in front of us. It's what are we doing that's interfering with it?
Yes.
And not allowing it to actually exist in reality. Now, I love the conversation, the direction that we're heading here. One of the questions I have on this concept of trust, where is it in your life that you're lacking trust?
I'm not lacking a lot of trust right now.
That's good.
I can slip into moments of it. And, it can be that my daughters will be okay. That's one. I had a lot of, I have deep premonitions, and so sometimes that can be scary, but they've all been good. So if one of those premonition type things happen, I actually knew my daughter, my daughter had a really, really bad car accident, the older one. And she begged me to take the car this day, and it was raining and there was leaves out on the road. I'm like, no. And she wore me down. I would wear down easy because I was tired. And I'm out showing houses, and there's a Columbus Day parade in my area. And so I tell her and her friend, yes, but only you two, lunch and back, blah blah blah. I'm showing the house like a quarter mile away from the parade. And I hear an ambulance, and I turn to my client and I said, that's my daughter. He's like, what, are you crazy? And then a phone rings, a number I don't know, and it's the police, and it's my daughter. So I've had some of that in my life, and that can be scary, but also just being more in tune to, so now I trust myself more too, that I should have listened. I had the intuition to not let her drive that car. And so the trust means when you lose that, when you slip out of that trust a little bit more, it just means you need to take three deep breaths. You need to, use your I am affirmations, which I truly believe in. You need to listen to the things that make you feel better. Yeah. You need to meditate. You need to pray. You need to journal. And literally, I can get myself back on track in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And so even financially, because that was a lot. And I'm separated from my husband. That was part of the wreckage of healing and breaking patterns. And it was at the worst time, but then at the end of this year, I did really well, broke the 6 figures, but I wasn't the kind of clients, and it wasn't the way. So I let go of those clients. That's ultimate trust.
Yeah.
Like, I need that money, but I'm not going to operate from a place of need. I'm only going to operate from a place of trust. And guess what? It's April. I was going to say March. It's April. I'm still able to go away. I'm able to support my daughter. My daughter's here right now with my granddaughter for a few weeks, and I'm able to, it all works out.
Yeah.
I'm supported, I'm protected, I'm loved. So that's the honest answer. Do I slip out of it But now I have the tools, I have the rituals, I have the routines, whatever you want to call them.
Yep.
I know how to tap right back into it.
Yep.
And so I told that story because I had to, I have those moments, but what happened was not listening to my intuition.
Mm-hmm.
I literally knew to not let her drive that car. And as soon as I heard it, I knew you didn't listen to your intuition. And so that's what it is. The trust is all about being connected intrinsically.
Yeah. Which is kind of a full circle moment to the conversation, because that was largely what led you down the paths in your life that you had, was the level of disconnection that you had with yourself. And yet you're now in a place that you're deeply connected. What I really appreciate, I often talk about this as well. It's like I used to exist in those low frequency energy and emotions for months and years. And there was a progression, right? Then it was weeks and months, and then it was days and weeks, but now it's minutes and moments.
Yes.
Right? Like I don't ever want anyone to believe that you're going to fully eradicate these low frequency energies and emotions. It's a part of the human experience. The question is what can we learn from them, and how do we move through them so that they don't create more damage in our lives? And that's basically what you suggested. Now, do I have permission to give a small reflection to you on something that I've seen? Okay. Now, this one is not going to be like a deep, profound one, though I see a couple of things that I will want to share with you. This one is really just a pragmatic, really easy thing for you to pick up on. You've used the word should many times in our conversation. Sure. And you even said it as it relates to your daughter. I should have listened to my intuition, right? Should is a shame-based word.
Yeah.
Because it implies whoever you are, whatever you did, it's not good enough. And so I believe that there is not a single situation that we typically use the word should that we couldn't replace it easily with either could or would.
Yeah, agreed.
And so that's all that was the one piece I wanted to say is,
that's very deep.
Well, it's
very deep, Brian.
But you've also commented on more than one situation where you've carried existing guilt and shame connected to periods in your life. And so just saying it lowers your frequency.
Yep.
Are you familiar with Hawkins' scale, his frequency scale?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
I love David Hawkins.
Shame is the lowest registerable frequency on the scale.
It sure is.
Right?
And
it's at 20.
I lived with it.
Yeah. And 90% of the world are stuck between 100 and 150, which is anger and fear. Right. And so that's where I am always paying attention. That's why we use the language with trash from your past is like, look, the second we get into the shame and blame energy, we're done.
Yes.
Right. Until we pull ourselves out of that frequency and energy, we have no capacity to heal, grow, learn, move. Right. It keeps us stuck and swirling. And so that's where I believe it's not about the eradication, elimination of the word should. It's about allowing ourselves, of shame. It's about allowing ourselves to, again, learn, grow, and move through it so that it doesn't actually impact us from a damage perspective.
Interesting. And I agree with you, but I will also say this, regret, right, was a big one for me too. But I've learned to use regret as a motivator, and but I'm not denying, because last night I had a moment. I had a memory come through last night that was so powerful and so painful. I had to get out of my bed. I had to go into my daughter's room, and I just had to cry. I haven't even shared with her why.
Yeah.
And this is how beautiful our relationship is. It wasn't like she didn't get into like hurt, like, let me take care of me because I don't know how to do this for mom. Like, what's wrong? Please tell me. You got it. Like, she didn't do any of that. She let me just come in to her space and just cry and walk away. And so shame is still, I say also like what happened with my business partner. I didn't get into details, but it literally was because I was wearing shame button over here and a guilt button over here, and allowed myself to be vulnerable because I was not in integrity with what I needed to be integrity with who I am and what was important to me. Boom, the button, push. So you're 1,000% right.
It's interesting on the word that you just used, though, too, regret, right? Bezos kind of popularized regret minimization theory, right? And this whole idea that we know that when people are on their deathbed, asked looking back on their lives, the things they regret most are the things that they never actually tried versus the ones they tried and perceivably failed, right? Even if it didn't become what they want. And so it's interesting because I do think about this, and regret, though it has its own name and its own definition, I think regret is a byproduct of shame in many cases. And I also believe that regret is also grieving. Yes. It's grieving the loss of opportunity, grieving the loss of time that we'll never get back, right? It's grieving the loss of connections or things that are created. And grief happens to be, shame and grief are really the two deepest emotions that most humans experience. And so it can be extremely, extremely powerful. Again, that's where we always look back. It's like, look, like I learned a long time ago not to get stuck by the things that had happened to me, but learned how to get moved by what they could do for me.
Yes.
Right. And it's just this like small nuance of recognizing and owning that it's like, look, I've always made every decision based on the best of the ability I could, given what I knew at that time of my life.
Yes.
So I could sit and look back and say regret, but that's also not fair to myself because I'm viewing it through my lens of understanding of what I know today, not what I did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Right. And I wasn't existing in regret in those moments.
Yes.
Right. Which also goes to show that it was one of those things that we did the best we could.
Yes.
You know, you do a whole lot of work with people to help them actually get clear on their core values and getting back into alignment with those core values. So I'd love it if you could give us a little bit of insight for you as to what are your defined core values today, and what does the process of helping people identify their own and creating alignment with them look like?
My core values are wisdom, integrity, compassion, love, grace, and they change quite a bit. I still try to refine, and I actually had a pet peeve. You know, this word of the year? Well, for the longest time, not the longest time, but it's been popular like the last 5 years. I literally got into complete judgment on it. Like, this is stupid. Like, one word. Why would anybody want to embody one word when there's all these beautiful words and all these values and all these that you can live by? And then something happened to me last year. And when I really realized that being in gratitude is, I think, and I don't think it's like number one on Hawkins' list, but it's number one on my list. It's very close though, if it's not. So I think love is the ultimate, right?
I think it's love. Yeah.
So gratitude, living in gratitude is my ultimate virtue and the ultimate space that I want to be in. And I truly believe you cannot be sad and grateful at the same time. You can be sad and happy at the same time, but you cannot be anything but grateful when you are grateful, and your body floods with all these beautiful emotions. And so I decided, I think it was the beginning of this year, that, okay, fine, I have a word. It's grateful. And when somebody asks me now, how are you? It's such a weird question that we're just programmed to ask, and everybody actually has to stop and think. And that's a negative track that can happen, because you're like, should I answer honestly, or should I answer what happened this morning, or should I, right? Grateful. I am grateful. And so I actually am looking over here because I have my core values on the wall, but they're blocked by my new vision board right now because I don't know them by heart. I do have memory issues, but I know what my core values are. I align myself with them every day, and they do change, you know, but I have my top 30.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate even how you talked about gratitude. And in particular, I want to call attention to what you said. It floods your body with all these positive emotions. You know, I find that many people who are promoting gratitude today do it and practice it in an intellectual only way.
You just nailed it, because practicing gratitude is pick up the phone and say thank you at that moment. And, you know, going back to even, I just, before this call, reached out, just a little text to a woman who played a mentor in my life and just did amazing things for me. And something just flooded me, and I just shot her the text. You're 1,000. It's not just journaling 5 things I'm grateful. It's embodying.
It has to be embodied. It has to be embodied. And just like what we talked about with the contrast between your learnings and teachings, even as a Buddhist priest, to the point where you finally embodied all of those lessons within yourself, was the transformation point. Gratitude is the same way. If it exists up in our head or just in a journal without the understanding and application of it, and allowing ourselves again to just fully experience it and feel it, then it doesn't actually elevate us in terms of frequency to the way that it can. Yeah. And so that's one of the other areas that I just speak some truth to, at least in my perspective, as I see out in the world, because gratitude's one of those buzzwords right now. And I really wanted to call attention to the fact that the way you described it is the real level of gratitude, right?
Absolutely.
And it's a beautiful thing to even just witness you communicate that.
We'll find the gifts, right? This is the other thing. So when you get into those moments, like, listen, I had lunch with a friend who her husband died last year, and when he had the stroke and went into the hospital and was in ICU for 27 days before he died, she found out he was an alcoholic. He never even knew he drank. And what do I say? What do I say? What do I say? This is what am I saying to this woman to make it better? And then I said, do I have permission to go into this space right now? And she said yes. I said, what are the gifts? What are the gifts? And she said, no one's asked me that, and I don't know the answer. I said, you don't have to. You just have to start looking for them. You have to start recognizing them. And that's gratitude. And you know what? She texted me this morning. She goes, I feel a little different. I feel a little different today. And I said, great, just keep looking for them. And that's gratitude.
You also exhibited, by the question of asking for permission, what creating a safe and protected space looks like. Many people give feedback or dialogue without the permission to do so, and then it's not actually even energetically received at the same level. But when someone says yes, they also energetically and emotionally open to receive it. And so even just that small, little, subtle question that you embedded in your conversation, it's similar to what I asked a minute ago. Do I have permission to give a small reflection to you?
Yes. I have to get better at that. I'm very passionate.
Yeah, no. I mean, but I get it. And it's something that I always have to slow myself down on. And I try wherever I possibly can, because if I don't ask for permission, I don't really feel like it's my place to say anything. I even sometimes ask clients who are paying me to give them the coaching for permission in certain windows, because depending on where it is or what it is, I want the process of them accepting and acknowledging to open up their own energy before I give them anything. And I think it's extremely profound, but again, it was really nuanced in how you said it. So I was just calling attention to it for the listeners. I would also, with your permission on that point, I'd like to give you one other subtle shift in language that I've heard you utilize. You've said more than once that you have a bad memory. And you've also referenced like, oh man, I had the book, but I don't remember the author. I blah, 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 blah. Right.
Yes.
By the way, I deeply resonate with that, because for years, most of my life, I used to believe I had a really bad memory because I have an extensive level of knowledge in a variety of ways, but my recall and access to that knowledge isn't always when I want it. Right. Now, on the flip side, what I started to realize is, for me, it's not about accessing knowledge. It's not about good memory or not. It's about actually surrendering enough to allow whatever wisdom needs to flow through me to do so. And what I've surrendered to is that I don't need to be able to reference the exact source, the exact language, the exact piece. What I need to access is the lesson that's behind it that I'm trying to teach.
Yes.
And so,
which I'm really good at doing.
Which is why I'm flipping that back at you, because I see the same thing in you, and I've seen it in how you answer questions. So I want you to stop saying you have a bad memory. No, it's not about memory. It's about allowing the wisdom to be accessible when you need it.
Yes.
Not the knowledge, because the knowledge isn't it. It's the wisdom.
I came full circle on that last week, because I tend to show up for like whatever's and then I'm like so worried about the memory, right? So I stopped and I just tapped into my higher self 5 minutes before, and I did that today too. Just tap in and the knowledge will come through and let it go.
I love it.
But I still haven't stopped saying.
Yeah. So I was just a little loving nudge, because again, I just want you to be able to receive that for what it is.
I came here to learn.
Well,
I'm always
that's a beautiful thing, my friend. All right, so we're going to be wrapping up here relatively quick, but I have a couple other quick questions for you. What is your current existing biggest problem or challenge in life or business today?
This is another question, just like the trust one. It's like, I don't honestly feel like I have big troubles or challenges.
You wrote one down on the intake form.
I can't remember what it was. Was it? Okay. So if I had to say in this moment, it would be getting more clients.
You said reaching enough people was what you wrote down.
Reaching enough people.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a much better problem. Much better problem, because saying getting more clients is just not even where I want to be. So
what I hear you saying though, in getting more clients, is that that's the medium and pathway with which you can create impact. And so reaching enough people, it's about having access to enough people to be able to have enough of them lean into your world so that you can actually help them, because you're also on a mission, if I remember, to impact over 1 million high achievers by the next leap year. right? So we've got a 4-year window on this, and you're going to impact over 1 million people. Reaching enough people is a big part of that.
And the other part is when you ask the question and you say business, I still switch to a different side. Like, I've been merging these worlds. And so I gave you a business answer when I already know that my containers are one. It's business. That's why it's soulful prosperity, which I came full circle into just recently, because it's not different. Because business has a life to it, and a soul, and it can be it needs life force, right? Just like human beings. And so I gave you a business answer instead of a Jen answer.
It's okay. By the way, that's what probably would be expected on most podcasts. So that's okay. I love the business component of it. And that's where we're going to kind of wrap and end here. I'd love it if you could just give a little insight into how people can find you, how they can access you. I believe you've got weekly trainings that you do and coaching sessions and things that you'd like. We're going to put all of it in the show notes, but please give people access to how they can follow you and your wisdom.
So my website has pretty much everything, jennifermaher.com, JenniferMaher.com, Jen Maher Coach on Instagram, Jennifer Maher on Facebook. And I am doing lots of things that are free so I can reach as many people as possible. And then I have, group things, and I have one-on-one things, and I can come into corporations. I can do all kinds of things. It's all specific to the needs of who is in front of me. And I love what I do, and I'm really good at it because it's my calling.
Yeah, I love it. I am so grateful with how you've been with us today. Could you give us a closing thought from your perspective?
Closing thought from my perspective is just show up and be open. Right? Figure out how you can open yourself up to all the opportunity, all the knowledge, all the wisdom, all the joy, all the gifts, and the freedom that are in front of you right here and right now. And once you can recognize that, you're going to find the peace, and the abundance will follow.
I love that, my friend. I'm grateful for how open and transparent, open and vulnerable you were with us today.
Thank you so much for having me here, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, my friend. And for those of you that just watched Jen flip her lid and jump in, we can see how a life of disconnection can lead to a life of seeking approval and connection that ultimately she was able to wake up to with plenty of time to be able to maintain and repair both presence with her daughters and her granddaughters. But after years of practicing as an ordained Buddhist priest, she finally is living and embodying a lot of the principles that she's been teaching for years. See, here's the reality. We've said this for years, but she just said it really strong at the end. Life is first about showing up. Then it's about how you show up. Then it's about where you show up. So the bigger question for all of you as we wrap this episode is, are you showing up? To ultimately get to everything you want, it's going to require you to flip open your lid and scale your cane. What you can probably tell by now is that I love telling these stories, but what I love even more is the impact that's coming from them. You see, we're on a mission to impact over 1 billion lives as quickly as possible, but to do that, we need you. See, we believe that moved people move people. And so all I'm asking is if you've resonated, connected with any of the messaging, please consider commenting, sharing, leave a rating and review. Thank you so much for tuning into Flipping the Lid. And if you want more information on the show, how to become a guest, how to recommend a guest, or any of the other details, head over to flippingthelid.com. We'll see you there.